Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to a Lakers practice report. I am trying something new here after practices that I find insightful. I want to come on here and share some quick analysis with you guys about what we learned at Lakers practice. So today we spoke with JJ Redick, Austin Reeves, and D'Angelo Russell, and I think there were three takeaways from today's practice. The first one was that while JJ Redick wants the Lakers to shoot more threes this season, he was joking about attempting 50 threes per game and said that he wants the team taking about 5 to 6 more per game than they did last season. So for context, the Lakers attempted 31.4 three-pointers per game last season, which ranked 29th in the NBA. So if they take about 5 to 6 more threes per game, that would put them between 36.4 to 37.4 threes per game, approximately. And based on last season's rankings in terms of three-point attempts, that would put the Lakers between 11th in the NBA and 8th in the NBA. So it seems like JJ Redick's goal is to be a top 10 three-point shooting team in terms of volume. And I think that's a good thing. I think 53s is too much, especially for this group. Obviously, if it's coming within the flow of a game and a team is really packing the paint and it's D'Lo with 10 plus threes and LeBron or Austin or Dalton, like Dalton's got it going off the bench, or it depends on the context, right? So you never want to say never, but 53s is a lot. That is something that to me is more of a Dallas or a Boston style offense, and those teams have a lot of high volume capable shooters and also offenses that are designed to generate those types of shots. And I think the Lakers are trying to work toward that. But at the end of the day, when you have LeBron James and you have Anthony Davis, you're going to be a team that lives at the rim and lives in the paint. And I think that's going to be the strength of this team, is getting to the rim, finishing at the rim, getting to the free throw line. But if they can generate even 5 to 6 more threes per game, I think that's a win. And even if you see a slight drop off in terms of efficiency, I think the net positive of taking 5 to 6 more threes per game could take this team from being a top 3 offense for nearly half the season to potentially being a top 3 offense for the full season, and maybe even the league's best offense. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, but I think they have that's within the potential outcomes of this season for the Lakers, especially if they can just fine tune the offense and put up some guardrails, put up some more organization and structure, as we've started to see, especially looking at that first half against Phoenix. So JJ has a very dry sense of humor, and he has this element of sarcasm that can sometimes come off as him just being totally serious. Like it's a very deadpan style of humor. I think we're still getting used to that. And look, he clearly he said it was a promising thing that the Lakers took 40 threes in a game, and that would still be above that level of about 36 or 37. So I think he clearly wants the Lakers taking somewhere in that high 30s, if not around the 40 3-point mark in terms of attempts. But 50, I think, is like that really has to be a certain context to the game of someone's just feeling it, or a team is really, really packing the paint and just giving you wide open threes. And if you're going to get wide open threes and it's basically target practice out there, that's one thing. But so some people I saw freaking out about the quote, and JJ clarified, he provided the additional context to it. And so now we know that the real goal is 5 to 6 more threes per game, which again would put the Lakers about 11th to 8th based on last year's three-point rankings in terms of attempts. The second thing for me was more Anthony Davis at power forward, which was to be expected, I think, just because it was the low-hanging fruit in the rotation of last year. The Lakers played well with Christian Wood next to AD, and there was a pretty small sample size with Jackson Hayes next to AD. I believe they only played about 90 minutes together last season. So seeing that in the beginning of midway through the first quarter was really fascinating, and something that I wonder if we'll see maybe 2 to 3 shifts a game of AD and Jackson, even if it's for just like 2 to 4 minutes a shift, something like that. That would be pretty interesting. So I asked JJ Redick about it, and I just said, we only saw them for about 90 minutes last season. Like, what do you think of Jackson and AD together? What were you trying to get out of that lineup? And he said the thing to him that he really enjoys is with AD playing at the 4, which I found interesting as well, that he delineated that AD is the 4 in the lineup and that Jackson is the 5, which I've always viewed it the other way, just because AD's, he plays bigger than his size, and especially in comparison to a guy like Jackson or a guy like Christian, AD typically is the rim protector. He's typically the guy in the pick and roll coverages. But JJ said that he likes AD playing at the 4 because it allows him to switch within the Lakers defensive system. And right now, the Lakers defensive system, they are switching 1 through 4 or redding things that they call it. They're reds. A red is a switch. Switching term internally. So when it's 1 through 4 and you have AD at the 4, you can switch AD on to any of the other 3 positions there, and even if 5s if need be. So and then you have Jackson there in the back line, and so now one thing with that is as Kranjus has talked about a lot on his podcast and on Twitter /X, the 5 tends to be the guy that is more in the ball screens, and just typically centers are the ones often setting screens. So that's going to be the player that is dragged into the pick and roll coverage. So in this instance, that would be Jackson more than AD. But then I think the upside to that is if you have Jackson in the pick and roll coverage and they somehow get by Jackson, well, now you have AD rotating over instead of having AD in the pick and roll coverage, and that the player rotating over is Rui or LeBron. Or Vando obviously could do it, and when he's healthy. But so I just think this is a positive overall. It's just bigger lineups. Again, going back to last year's lineup data, the lineup data was much better when it was bigger lineups with Rui or LeBron at the 3, with Jackson or Christian next to AD, the 2 big looks, and just playing bigger translated to better lineups for the Lakers, bigger front courts in particular. So I think that's something that with Christian Wood and Jared Vanderbilt out to start the season, that seeing more of Jackson next to AD makes a lot of sense. I don't know how much we're going to see it. Could only be 1 or 2 shifts a game, could only be a few minutes a game. And if that's the case, that's fine. But I think that the one thing is having 2 7-footers out there and having a guy in Jackson who is capable of operating as a DHO guy, as a roller, as a vertical lob threat. Like, he can replicate some of the JaVale, Dwight offensive duties. Now, defensively, he's a totally different defender. He's more of a mobile big, more of a guy that you want on the perimeter trying to be disruptive. He's not that traditional low post defender or shot blocker. He tends to foul a lot. So different defensive profile than the JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard type, but offensively, he can do a lot of those things. And really, I think he's more skilled than those guys, at least in terms of his passing and his DHO game and just ability to read a defense. So again, I don't know how much we're actually going to see this, whether it's a shift a game, a couple shifts, maybe upwards of 3 shifts a game, and it could only be 2 to 4 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, whatever, per shift. But even 6 to 8 minutes a night of 2 big looks, or 8 to 10 minutes, whatever it ends up being, I think those lineups are going to do really well. And even if you have a little bit of weaker defensive personnel, I think shrinking the floor, shrinking the paint with 2 7-footers, near 7-footers, whatever you want to call it, that to me is a win for the Lakers. So I think that development and JJ recognizing the value of AD playing at the 4 and his ability to switch and to switch onto the perimeter and then also be the low man if Jackson is the one in the pick and roll, that's the Lakers needed to recognize that last year, really even the year before. You play more of that. So the fact that it's being recognized in the preseason and they're using it, first game with the projected rotation, and we already see it within the first few minutes of the game, that's very encouraging. So that's another thing to take away. And then number 3, the Lakers are still using Limbo rate, which we did not know, but JJ Redick shared his philosophy with regards to crashing versus getting back. And we knew about the corner crashing, right? So JJ's been talking about corner crashing and wanting to be a better offensive rebounding team, and talking about how the Lakers were both awful at offensive rebounding and awful at transition defense, and that's really hard to accomplish. It's typically, if you're crashing the offensive glass, then you're probably not getting back in transition. But if you're getting back in transition and not crashing the offensive glass. Like, you should be better at transition defense. So the fact that the Lakers are bad in both was not good last year. And so we had our first limbo rate reference, which was something that Darvin Ham often referenced last season. It's an internal metric that the Lakers analytics department came up with. And the Lakers ranked last in that limbo rate last season. And really, limbo rate is the transition from going from offense to defense and how quickly you are getting back, essentially. That's like the most basic way I can explain it. So just that rate of okay, shot goes up. Are you crashing? Are you getting back? Like, how quickly are you making a decision, and how quickly are you moving? And really, it's more of a transition defense stat. But for the Lakers to be last in that, and also be last in transition defense or close to it, like that I mean, they had a lot of guys in no man's land and a lot of guys in limbo. And JJ dropped an Inception reference of that you watching Inception, that it's bad to be, as we all know, it's bad to be in limbo. That was essentially the paraphrasing his quote there. But so JJ said his strategy and his philosophy is, in an ideal world, the Lakers would be crashing with all 5 guys and then deal with the consequences in terms of transition defense. I don't fully agree with that. I think you probably want to send 2 guys, maybe 3 tops, and have at least 2 guys getting back. Just because if you don't get that offensive rebound, or even if you score, all of a sudden guys can leak out, and opponents, if you have a Jokic or a Kevin Love or one of these guys who can make those football passes, outlet passes, Tyrese Halliburton, like those types of guys that can hit those hit-ahead passes and get out quickly, all of a sudden you're potentially facing a 2-on-0, 3-on-0 going back the other way. So I'm not now, JJ said in an ideal world, we don't live in an ideal world, so I don't know, maybe that's just his philosophy and it's not necessarily something he's imparting on the team, and I think that's something to monitor the rest of the preseason, is just what their transition defense looks like. What does it look like in terms of how many guys are crashing? So I wouldn't overreact yet to that sentiment, but certainly it can result in some positives of the Lakers just getting more offensive rebounds and putting pressure on defenses in that way. But again, you can play with fire and get burned there easily, where if you don't get the offensive rebound, or if you do score and you have 5 guys crashing the paint, all of a sudden guys can leak out and opponents can game plan for that. So I still think you got to send at least 1, most likely 2 guys back, and maybe even 3, and just have a couple guys crash, like AD, maybe the weak side shooter, corner crashes or whatnot. But again, I don't want to overreact in either direction, because JJ, it seemed like, was having more of a philosophical answer to the question rather than a practical answer or what he thinks will actually be applied. Because again, I think the Lakers have a long way to go to being a team that sends all 5 guys to the rim, or to the glass in terms of offensive rebounding, because that's just not been who they've been in the LeBron AD era. So I think they are going to focus more on transition defense, but I think JJ's larger point was just make a decision, right? Like, either crash or get back. Don't jog back. Don't half attempt to crash and then not go for it and then lollygag back on defense. Like, you need to make a decision, be decisive, and then be aggressive in whatever that decision is. So I think overall, those are my 3 takeaways from practice. Again, more threes, but within reason, not the 53s a game, and probably not even the 43s a game. Some more 80 at power forward, which unlocks, I think, both his defense as a rim protector, but also his versatility, despite NBA GMs not recognizing it. In the latest GM survey, AD did not make the list for most versatile defender in the league, which I think is blasphemous, nonsensical, just does not, it's crazy, but it is what it is. I think he will show people that when he's in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation this year. And then point number 3, Lakers are really making an emphasis on corner crashing and just crashing in general, and trying to improve their transition defense and their limbo rate. So those are my 3 takeaways from today's practice. I will try to do this more regularly if you guys enjoy it. Please let me know in the comment section on YouTube if you do. But as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back later in the week after the Lakers-Bucks game. I will talk to you then.